Everyone on the line. This is the All Hazard Consortium's COVID-19 Innovations for Response webinar, specifically focusing on technology. This is our third webinar on business resiliency. We had intended to do a 3-day conference in June on business resiliency, but with everything going on, we've had to cancel that. So we've decided to bring you the information in these 60 to 90-minute webinars. So thanks for joining us. And my name is Laura Johnson. I'm the Director of Conferences and Events for All Hazards Consortium. I just wanted to make a few administrative remarks before we get started. First, this will be recorded. So if you want to share this recording with any peers, colleagues, or friends, we'll send that to you as a follow-up. Secondly, we will have time for a very casual Q&A at the very end. So stick with us if you have the time, and you'll get a chance to ask some questions of our panelists today. And I think that is about it. So Tom, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Okay. Great. First, let me say thank you to all of you joining us today. And Laura, thank you. You've been putting in a lot of time here, and appreciate you and what you're doing here. Thanks, and to our panelists. What you're going to see today is going to blow your mind, in my opinion. I've been at this 16 years, and I can say I've never seen innovation ever like what we're going to hear about today. Today's just tip of the iceberg, but perfect storm, you know, if you will. So I'm really, really happy that we're able to get this group together and talk about both private and public perspectives on this whole technology discussion. We're going to have future technology sessions coming as well. But the whole point of this is to get operational with you all so that we can capture this information, get it out there, and fix something, right? So the people within the consortium, as many of you are really about trying to find out operational issues and fix them or address them, not admire the problem, study the problem like I did my whole career, right? So this is a fun group, and it's an active group, and it's very innovative, so I'm really glad to see this. So today you're going to hear reference to the SICE. So the SICE is a legal framework that was really technically stood up in 2013, formalized in 2015, but it's a legal framework that allowed the private sector to protect their information as they share it with government. So they use it as a framework to divide information by use case and have people and data clumped together in different cells like a honeycomb, but nobody has access to all the cells, which is great. So they took the idea from the Defense Industrial Base, formalized it through a DHS Science and Technology grant in 2015, and the private sector just took it on. So if you hear about the SICE, you'll understand what it is. It's free to join. We'll talk about it at the end if you want to register with that. It's very simple. But if you hear the SICE, you'll know what it's talking about. The SICE just provides the framework to let protected operational, information be shared and innovate, right? So it's a fantastic tool that government and industry both need because they need each other to work together and solve these problems. Okay? Thank you. Laura, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So today's technology panelists are Chris McIntosh, who's the CEO of Ben Ear, Greg McShane with CISA at DHS, and Rob Edsel at Idaho National Labs. I wanted to first go ahead and ask Chris if he could talk a little bit about the SICE. So I'm going to stop my screen share and turn things over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Let me share my screen. Everybody can see that?
Yep.
Okay. Appreciate it. So the SICE. The interesting thing about the timing of this is we, the All Hazards Consortium, had been talking about the ability to stand up a capability to share information more effectively during a future event, maybe a hurricane or some sort of multi-state event. And Tom and this group have been talking about that for a while. And we had just started doing that in March, maybe February, and we thought, oh, we'll get something together by hurricane season, so June or so. And then all of a sudden things got sped up very quickly. And by the way, I got to tell Greg McShane I have headset envy.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. So obviously our 6-month project, we needed to get something done yesterday. So we leveraging existing technology that's out there. We used an Esri ArcGIS hub and pulled that together in 6 days through a lot of late nights and a lot of 11 p.m. iteration with Tom and crew. We pulled that together. And why did we go with the ArcGIS hub? Well, one, first of all, a lot of information is out there and it's some sort of geospatial interoperable format. And so that leveraging as much of that as possible was a big part of it. The ability to configure it quickly, to take that information and get it out in an organized fashion was really important. And also, maybe most importantly, the ability to scale with load. So using a cloud infrastructure meant that no matter how many people are hitting a site, you're able to keep up with the loading. In my career with the Virginia Emergency Operations Center, have scar tissue from that particular example where a map that we did once went viral and took down some servers. So we want to make sure we use the scalable infrastructure to do all that. So the hub, also, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. The hub technology, while it's been in development in various iterations for years, really became mainstream accessible right around the beginning of the year. So fortunately that happened, and our colleagues at Esri worked with us to get this up and running. So if this COVID situation had happened last year, we may not have had this kind of a tool available to us. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. What you're looking at is the landing page of the all hazard size hub, specifically developed for coronavirus. In the future, unfortunately, other things will happen. There'll be these for other types of hazards, as well as one for everyday use. We've organized it into some areas to make it really easy for you to navigate around government actions, things that are coming, state declarations, those kind of things. This information is coming from the National Governors Association, and I'll get into that more in a second. Commerce impacts coming from the American Trucking Association, specific things that are impacting or the ability for the transit industry. Data access, case studies, and other resources. So when you go to government actions, you see here a whole lot of different things that you can look at. You can go directly to any one of those, or you can just go to the overview of all of those types of things. And these are web maps and web applications that you'll find here. This is the result of aggregating hundreds and hundreds of documents and orders and PDFs that is being done by the National Governors Association. And now you can get a glance. This is the power of maps. You get a glance, you can see where are all the major disaster declarations. And right now it's the whole country, so it's not super exciting or intuitive, but things like where travel restrictions or closure of non-essential businesses. This will start to get much more interesting. It is now, as the situation is starting to change over the last week or so with states doing different things. So all of this is here for you to look at, and coming from data, like I said, from the National Governors Association, including things like who's put in orders for face cloth coverings and those kind of things, all in one place. Same thing with commerce impacts. You can go to the overview, or you can go through all of them. And the commerce, you can impacts if you're in the trucking industry or you're relying on the trucking industry. Things for what are CDL restrictions, weight waivers. If you click on one of these, you'll actually see what the waivers are, what the status of the waivers are. So they're all interactive maps. These are not pictures. These are live. You can zoom in and out of them. And like I said, there are pop-ups for each one. There's also, there's your weight limits by state. And then in here, we even have live traffic coming in for the entire country. So if you're in getting from here to there, you can pull in the live traffic service as well. Now, one of the things that's most important about using a hub versus a regular website is that this actually sits on top of an entire geospatial information system. So we can allow, you're not just seeing maps, you can actually get right to the data and pull this down. So if you're in a state agency, or if you're in an organization or a company and you want this data, but you want to pull it down because you have other data that you want to use it against that's in-house, you can click on this and you can actually copy the service. If your GIS folks can pull that down right into your own system. You can download the data itself in many different ways. You can look at the data, and this is what's different about using a hub as a part of ArcGIS versus what would be a typical traditional website. We also included in the data access different documents that you may want to see, these state and documents and other supporting things, as well as this information center, which is a Rolodex. And I get made fun of for using the term Rolodex because I guess that's a dated term now. I guess it's a contact list, I guess is what you have to say nowadays, of all the different many different links and things that you may want to go to get more amplifying information. Finally, we have a case study area where the site has many working groups where we're working on specific problems. So if you go to a case study area, you'll see a summary of what the case study is, an overview of what the case study has been working on, the problem statement, the impact statement, who is involved, and there's this legal disclaimer down here at the bottom that Tom was referring to, the legal framework that we operate within. The Chalk Talk video, which explains the use case, and then right here you can see the solutions and the links to all the solutions that that use case and that working group that worked in that use case came up with. So all this is designed to be a one-stop shop for you. And you can see as we work on more and more of these, you'll see, and I think we're going to talk some more about some of these case studies from the other panelists. Finally, there's other resources here, external resources that you can click directly to. Healthcare Ready, great partner. You just go right there and you go straight to their website if you want more information. So really excited about pulling this together with the team. Hopefully you find it as a good resource to find information and find data to support your needs. And Laura, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Go ahead and hit the stop. Okay, you got it.
Oh yeah, I'm a Zoom pro.
Not me, it takes me a second. All right.
Hey Chris, this is Greg. I thought it would be really interesting if you kind of mentioned on how for the COVID-19 kind of response was how it evolved in the data gathering or aggregation, how we kind of started with, hey, let's just start hitting up all the state websites. Who's collecting the information? Where can I get it? How can I feed it into my tools? And then even going through with the assistance of some of our protective security advisors, collecting some of that information, and then it evolving into, hey, this is all available now on the ArcGIS Hub that we're all leveraging. And it really enabled us to kind of develop the capability in the tool, access to the data, so that we can actually, create this tool that provides impact and value to the community. Yeah,
it's a great point. There's a couple different things at play there, Greg. And so what data, first thing is, what data can we get? What's the easy button? So where can we go grab data? And there's, you folks on the call, see there's data everywhere. Everybody's pushing out a map or an app. And so there's some of that that's readily available. And of course we leverage that. But the site isn't just about the technology hub that you see, it's about a community. So being able to work with Greg and the protective security advisors to go out and help gather documents and then take those documents and using human power to convert those and data enter those into something that powers a geospatial service. That's what happens behind the scenes and allows us the ability to do these things, is that combination of using some of the latest tools and technologies that are out there, but also having the relationships and the wherewithal to work with the human side of that to actually create data from different products and sources that are going all over the place. A lot of you, I'm sure, are like me, suffering from email overload because everybody wants to send you a document or a file. But having the ability to grab that stuff and turn it into one database to put on a map so you don't have to go through and read all of those is kind of thing that's going on behind the scenes with the sites, and being able to reach out to people like the PSAs and other groups to gather that information. Like the trucking data is coming from a spreadsheet that is then being updated into a GIS database by people every day. But that allows us to have those information products for all of you to see. So it's a true group effort to make this thing actually work the way it does.
Right. Hey, thanks, Chris. It is an awesome tool. And as Tom mentioned earlier, we're going to show you a slide later on how to access the sites, but I appreciate that. All right, let's go ahead and start our panel discussion. Our first question is going to go to you, Chris. Please describe the operational impacts that COVID-19 has had or is having on your company or your clients and the current challenges you're facing. And before you actually answer the question, I'd love it if you could take a minute to tell us more about what you do at Bent Ear and your professional career.
Yeah, thanks. So my background, I was a military naval officer, but after that, I was the Chief of Operations for Virginia Department of Emergency Management at the Virginia Emergency Operations Center, and then I was Virginia State Interoperability Coordinator. Then I was the Director of Public Safety at Esri out in California before I, at a bar, founded Bent Ear Solutions with a buddy of mine, and we decided to start this business. And what we do is we focus on the human technology interface. So how does the humans actually get the most out of the technologies that they're using, primarily GIS? So that's been really interesting now because both our company and our clients are working in an environment they've never worked in before. So not necessarily a virtual operations center, but an adaptive operations where people are working remotely. Some people are on site. One of our clients usually brings 70 people into their EOC for an incident. They had a weather response recently. They brought in 12, and the rest of them were spread out. So how are they using the technologies and the tools that are available to them to coordinate, share information, get situational awareness, collaborate is how this COVID situation has really changed how people operate. And in some ways, it's changed it for the better. I'm hearing that a lot. In some ways, people are saying we're actually more effective. In some ways, not. So it's really changed the way we do business. And I think that some of those changes are going to be permanent. So what we're looking at now is what's the good and how do we codify those, and how do we fix the bad and or the not so good. So that's been a big part of what we're doing both internally and externally. And it's kind of a new world. We used to, in emergency management, plan on daily normal operations, and you had COOP. So those are kind of your bookends, like everything's okay or the world has ended. But now we're in the middle, and so where are we in the middle of all that is kind of opening up some eyes and some possibilities, but also presenting some challenges.
All right. Rob Edsel, if you could also introduce yourself and if you have anything to add to question number 1.
Sure. Hi, my name is Rob, and I am a critical infrastructure analyst at Idaho National Laboratory. INL is what the acronym, and we have a giant spread in the desert of southeast Idaho that was originally for the testing for nuclear energy, and it still is. INL is one of the leading nuclear energy labs, but that's not what our department does, INL has, because of its size, was tasked with a bunch of different, starting with energy infrastructure, but has built different kinds of infrastructure test beds and technologies out on the desert. And it's moved from its own little grids of electricity and transmission lines to test beds for water infrastructure to communications and wireless technology. And so we became known as a sort of general critical infrastructure research lab, and our portfolio has grown quite a lot in the last 10 or 15 years in that space, in infrastructure security, which matches well with new initiatives at DHS. So even though we are technically a Department of Energy lab, most of my work and our department's work has been with DHS and specifically with the new cyber security and infrastructure security agency. So that said, that's sort of where we come from as INL, again, from Nuclear Energy Center to what is now talking to you all as, you know, in the private sector about your concerns and use cases and technologies that might be applied for COVID-19 response. And we have, you know, operationally, a lot of the work that we had been doing was on the classified side. So that's difficult to do from teleworking situation. If you're at home on your personal computer and going through the internet of your hometown, doing that kind of work is difficult. Most of the folks that need to do that kind of work still need to show up. But it turns out that a lot of us who are critical infrastructure analysts aren't doing work that's particularly sensitive or classified other than business sensitive or what we call protected critical infrastructure information sensitive. So we can work primarily from home. So operationally, our, you know, we're not having a great deal of challenges, as Chris said. In fact, some of us are, I would say, even more productive sitting here at home. And one of the great, you know, kind of examples of that is getting together with All Hazards Consortium and with Greg McShane from DHS, who you'll hear from in a minute, and folks with Chris's organization to establish some sort of quick turnaround COVID response kinds of tools and technologies. The SICE is one of those. All the web maps that you saw, we put together something that is even more kind of surgical in its, I would say, application, where we are, we were tasked with the use case of helping truckers and dispatchers make decisions about routes in the time of COVID, when it comes time to restrictions, declarations, emergencies, face coverings, and other sorts of government actions, as well as you know, just more general restrictions on truck travel. We put together an application, and we may have time to show it here in a little bit, but I know that's not what this question's about. But the ability to kind of make sort of quick turn applications and develop technologies is probably one of the things that makes a national lab unique, in that there was not a need for a call for proposals for this kind of technology from the government to send out to private sector consulting firms or anything. We already had an agreement in place, and we were able to turn something around in about, well, less than a week. And so these relationships that we've already established as the national lab with government agencies allow us to do some pretty rapid prototyping and rollout of some technologies. So that to me is an impact of COVID, in that it created a forcing function for us to do some work very quickly and I think quite effectively. And we are, you know, partnering with you all as, you know, private sector stakeholders through the All Hazards Consortium and through the SICE to respond to COVID. But you know, we are hoping that, you know, this is just the beginning, and COVID is, like I say, just a forcing factor for new technologies that will continue to develop. think that kind of is all I'll say for this
Great.
round of questions, unless there are other questions for me.
That's perfect, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Greg, why don't you say hello and let us know if you have anything to add to question number 1. Can you guys hear me?
Greg is on
Can you hear?
mute,
Can you hear me now? All right. I was, I guess, some little technical difficulties there. So regarding this question, it's kind of a interesting story to tell, as this COVID-19 responses we're a number of weeks in, and it's going back in time. But when it first kind of rolled out, you know, it was kind of, we were all directed to basically kind of telework, work from home. And a lot of us, you know, within CISA in the operations division, we're already set up for that. Aside from, yeah, we have a laptop, but we don't have the big screen. We don't have set up for dual screen. Some of us did, some of us didn't. So a lot of us were forced to just work off your laptops and eventually, you know, build out that capability across the board. You know, and that was in the unclassed environment. You know, in the classified environments, a lot of our watch analysts were, you know, due to the confined operations environment we work in, we're forced to kind of also telework. Fortunately, a lot of those folks already were outfitted to do that, so it was really an issue. The next issues or challenges were, you know, can the network actually handle a group of folks very large within CISA, all teleworking at once? And you know, we were very nervous in the beginning, but it all worked out, and we really had minimal issues. But some of the technology parts, which were really kind of interesting, was that, you know, about a year and a half ago, we rolled it over to Office 365. You know, worked a lot of the bugs out with some of their shared mailboxes, those types of things. But one of the things they were really trying to push out was a collaboration site called Teams, and it slowly was gaining traction. But with the whole situation and everybody teleworking, Teams was just a great tool and capability that we just launched, and everybody was using it, and it kind of created a, how do we use it? Not only how do we use it, how do we use it better? You know, we're, you know, throw in a SharePoint migration to SharePoint Online, a few knowledge wall installations and construction projects, and you know, the timing couldn't be better for some of those types of things. But that was just some of the initial impacts of COVID-19 had on our operations. But it all really kind of worked out, and you know, moving into kind of that, you know, recovery part and how do we get back to some sense of normalcy. I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were before, because I think a lot of the requirements are going to change, you know, from the number of folks that you have actually on your watch floor working on I think we're in a position where if you can telework, you're going to telework here on out, you know, visit the office maybe once a week or once a month, those types of things. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, Laura, but back to you.
No, and I think once people see the merits of teleworking, if they can do it, they're not going back.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So question number 2, actually, Rob, I'm going to address this one to you. How have you addressed the operational issues that the pandemic has caused since the outbreak, and what initiatives have you taken? There you go.
Okay, good. Yeah, so, you know, INL has, like I mentioned a little while ago, we try to be pretty nimble and try to respond to what we think, you know, how the tea leaves are being read and what kinds of things we're hearing in terms of, you know, the priorities of the federal partners, as well as we're getting into, you know, working with AHC and some other organizations, even what the private sector and state and local governments might be interested in tackling. And so, you know, we are always kind of got our ears to the ground for that. And COVID certainly made you know, we were very prepared as soon as we started to hear the potential impacts to infrastructure of COVID, we started to kind of gear up for potential work. We started to propose work to various agencies and to make sure that they knew our capabilities. And I think we are known currently as a pretty strong geospatial analysis laboratory. We have a lot of GIS analysts doing a lot of kind of mapping and visualization of infrastructure assets and specifically dependencies among infrastructure assets. So we're talking about things like how which substation which electrical substation would support a Trauma One health center, or what natural gas compressor station provides natural gas to a power plant. So those sorts of dependencies and geographical relationships are something that INL is known for, and our federal partners have come to us in other contexts. And now with COVID, you can see the importance of geography. I mean, Chris just brought it up in his presentation about the importance of mapping and the Esri platform in GIS. It has made geography a very important part of the national conversation. So we have put forth our geospatial analysis techniques, our critical infrastructure analysis methods, and so on, and have been able to respond not just to needs of Greg McShane's group, but some other folks in DHS's CISA and FEMA and other agencies. And we are also actively bringing our technology to at least state governments at this point to help out with their responses.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Hey, Greg, what about you? You talked about teams. So what initiatives have you taken over at CISA since the outbreak? Still have you on mute. Hey, Chris, you need to teach Greg how to use that unmute button.
No kidding, right?
I can't.
There we go.
Can you hear me now? All right.
Yeah,
So yeah, who's got control over that? I was wondering if that was my wife trying to keep me quiet here. So some of the operational issues, since the outbreak, I just want to kind of highlight, one of the unique opportunities this really did present, and part of it was an effort we already had been working with the All Hazards Consortium through the NIP Challenge. And then it was probably about the end of last year where we really put another contract in place, with Idaho National Labs to really continue some of the efforts that we were working on. It's the operational problem solving that we were really, hot on the trail of working. And then when I say that, it was really focused on, the recovery, the response efforts during a hurricane. It's that pre-staging type challenges. It's the fuel availability, fuel restoration. And one of the things that really presented themselves in this response for COVID-19 was the supply chain. It's the ESF 14, it's the cross-sector dependency, interdependency challenges that we are faced with the new essential support function 14 that we were really challenged with, and it just recently stood up. So we've been really working hard to really figure out exactly what that is. And one of the opportunities was, creating this, commercial routing application to really identify and mitigate some of the risks to impacts to commerce. And with some of the data available and what we were collecting through the state governors associations and the state councils, really presented itself to create this tool. It's a very simple tool, but yet it was very unique in the sense that it identified a problem that we've been trying to solve and a solution that actually we stood up. So,
hey, Greg, is that internal? Is that internal used?
No, this is that public-private sector partnership we have, and it's really for the community. It's not for the federal government. Yes, the federal government can use it, but it's for that trucking community. It's delivering the goods and services from point A to point B, and it provided that, what are those restrictions? What are those waivers that I have to get from, if I'm traveling from New York City to Los Angeles, and what's the most effective and efficient route to take with some of those restrictions in place?
Okay, great. Hey, thanks, Greg. Chris, what about for your clients? Any different way of looking at things since the pandemic started? Oh, you're still unmuted. I take back what I said earlier. There you go.
Okay.
Must be on a delay.
Yeah. So one of the most interesting has been the ability to operate an operation center while maintaining social distancing. And as I mentioned, you're bringing in less people, but even when you have the people there, making sure that you're able to keep them from 6 feet away from each other. So what I've seen some really fascinating approaches to that is distributing people across the facility instead of bringing them all into one room, and then mapping the square footage of each room and using that to determine how many people could be in that room. So for example, you have an operations center, but you have conference rooms around the building. And each conference room has X number of square feet, which would allow you to have 4 people in there and maintain social distancing guidelines. So you set that you're going to put 3 in there, so there's room for 1 other person to come in and have ad hoc meetings. That level of planning, I have never seen before. And it is absolutely fascinating, even down to the granular level of assigning groups of people to specific bathrooms. So if there's a positive, you've limited the contact pool, and you know who that contact pool is. A lot of that can be done geospatially. There are products that allow you to take a certain amount of square footage or acreage and then take an item of a specific dimension or a buffer and it will show you where to put them. We use that, for example, for how many bucket trucks can you fit into a Walmart parking lot. But you can also use that for how many people do I fit into a room. The scale doesn't really matter. So seeing that and seeing how people have innovated to change the way they operate and do it very, very quickly has been really, really fascinating to see. And I think some of these things are going to continue to be just the new way we do things.
And Chris, I see that across so many industries, from conferences and events to obviously restaurants and movie theaters, and even in the emergency preparedness world, it's an important thing to take a look at. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And just before we move on to question 3, I wanted to let you know that the tool that Greg was speaking about is something that we will show you towards the end of the discussion today. So if that's something you want to see on the computer, stick with us. Okay, question number 3 is about partnerships. And Greg, I'm going to have you start on this one. Can you tell us about key partnerships that were utilized, that you already had in place, or new ones that you had to make due to the pandemic?
Yeah, I think a lot of those were in place. I mean, just take simple things when we stand up our crisis action team. It's those private sector calls that we have. That we stand up on a daily basis. It's those existing relationships we've had with FEMA. We're down at the National Response Coordination Center for ESF2, which is comms, and ESF14, which is that sector cross sector. A lot of those relationships are already in place. Through the ISACs. Where we really have leveraged in the we also have our regional offices. Those folks are out there. Those are the PSAs, the cyber sector advisors as well, that have those existing relationships, and that's really played a big part in the last few years as CISA has matured in leveraging those I'll call it offices, remote sensors, those relationships that we've always had, but now have really formalized. So we have a lot more formalized RFI processes that include the regions, and we leverage a lot of the partnerships with the All Hazards Consortium. It's just another avenue to the private sector, where we have engaged with integrating with a lot of the states, dealing with those, again, going back to what are those problems that we're trying to solve. And if you have that existing relationship, it's easy to pick up the phone and call those folks direct, or get on a call and identify what those challenges and problems that they're having.
All right, Greg. Hey, Rob, what about you?
Certainly what we were just talking about with partnerships with DHS, we have certainly leveraged our associations with AHC to, I'd say All Hazards Consortium's particular skill is the establishment of the relationships and the trust that I don't think as a national lab we are able to do very well on our own, just because we sort of sit outside of the, kind of that sphere, and to be able to utilize and leverage some of the relationships that All Hazards Consortium and the SICE already have developed to pull out unique use cases and to establish research questions that we can address and that are priorities for the people who are actually going to be in the field using these things. It's a really important relationship that and partnership that we've built just in this particular in this particular application. And of course, it was all prompted by COVID, although we had already kind of known that this would be a fruitful relationship with all kinds, all kinds of sectors of infrastructure, from electric to transportation, utilities, water, and so on. Stuff that we already have been doing at INL, but just hadn't been able to establish partnerships and relationships with the private sector, and even state and local governments that AHC has been able to provide. So.
Yeah,
I think
and I appreciate you bringing it up, because that's one of the goals in doing these virtual conversations too, to have others hear, other challenges, some of the challenges you're going through, or some of the innovations that you're talking about, things that they've thought about. Do they have others that they can chat to us later in this discussion and share with us? So thanks for bringing that up, Rob. And Chris, did you have anything to add to that?
Chris is muted, I see.
There we go. The only thing I would add is the value of associations has really shown through this. So through the All Hazards Consortium network and other associations that are working with the All Hazards Consortium expands the reach of all of us to multiple stakeholders and multiple members. I mean, I mentioned a lot of the data that is in the hub is coming from the National Governors Association, but EEI and all of these folks are really rallying and representing their stakeholders well by sharing and collaborating across traditional association lines. And that has been invaluable for all of us to get the information that we need and get it shared to the people who need it. I hope that sticks after COVID kind of wanes, because in my career in emergency management, I've never seen that level of collaboration before, and it's been very helpful.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot, Chris. All right, let's move on to our next question, which has to do with planning. So, and I'm going to direct this to you, Rob. How are you planning for the weeks ahead, both inside your organization and externally?
I literally just got off a call as to whether or not we were wearing cloth coverings on our face when we go back to work, that kind of planning. And so, we are obviously actively planning for telework, or, how this is all going to affect our lives, as I'm sure most of folks that are teleworking are beginning the re-entry program, project. But we are, however, very interested in following up on just what Chris was mentioning about the idea that we may be, seeing a new age of trust, especially with COVID being sort of a common enemy that we all can say, here's how we can all work together across sectors, between research centers and the private sector, sharing data and sharing information that will all help us become more resilient. So our plan, from a more philosophical point of view, rather than whether or not we go back to work with cloth coverings on our face, is really to, kind of see if we can catch this lightning in a bottle and say, look what we could do when we all came together in trust and understood the dependencies among, as Greg was saying, the CSF-14 enterprise, where we're examining cross-sector emergency dependencies and the importance of knowing, what the transportation system looks like if you are trying to stage electrical service trucks. That these are cross-sector dependencies that if we share information, we can act quickly, act more responsibly, and become more resilient. So I think that's going to be part of our long-term strategy in terms of, making sure that we are protecting and securing the country.
All right, Rob, thanks so much. Hey, Greg, what about you? How are you planning for the weeks ahead?
Sure. That's a great question, Laura. And aside from the quality family time and the long list of projects I've got around the house that keep piling up, as in kind of the government route, we're trying to change our look and really forecast what do we need to do, what do we need to change. It was like 3-4 weeks ago we're working to requirements that are 3-4 months old. Where are we in the budget and the contract cycle? How do we adjust some of those contracts to really identify where's the need? Do I need 5 IT technicians to support my watch? Probably not if we're going to go back to half staff watch. Those types of things we're looking at. And then what are the next requirements? We built out some initial tools. What else? Based off of some of the after actions we're getting from COVID-19, where's the need? And trying to adjust and identify where we can best support. Again, we have a current capability. We're working with the Idaho National Labs, All Hazards Consortium. What are those next use cases that we want to prepare for, in the upcoming hurricane season? What if that next hurricane comes, and how do we respond in a COVID-19 situation? All the PPE, do we have access? Who provides that? Not only for the federal government, but for, all your contractors, who's got the responsibility for that? It's moving your vehicles from state to state. What are those restrictions? How do we get back to some level of normalcy? It's the lodging issue. How are we changing the way we do an access to a hotel? Do I have an app? Do I got to prepay? How do I access my room? How do I pay for my room? Where do I get my next meal from? It's probably going to be a box lunch, not the bar and restaurant that's maybe open downstairs. So those are the things we're kind of looking at, and more to come on that because we got a lot of meetings and a lot of things to tackle going forward. And I'm hoping to get back to some level of normalcy rather than the 10-12-hour days on top of everything else you need to do. But the days go by fast, and yet they're still very long. So
I said the same exact thing to my husband today. Yeah. Thanks, Greg.
Sure.
Chris, do you have anything, or you or anyone in that staff I saw walk by your background have anything to add on that question? I think we need to wait on a delay on a unmute there. Oh, you're still muted.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. Working from home has got its challenges when all your kids are at home. So that's the near term thing. But this is an interesting and some challenging time. I'm a small business owner, so we have a little bit different perspective. In the planning for the weeks ahead are from fortunately, I guess, we're in a bit disaster business, so we're as a company we're doing okay. But there's that. What if there's another round of this? What if we don't come out the other side of this? How does that impact the ability to maintain a business? So there's a lot of work going on in our company and many like ours around that side of it. So that's a big internal focus. Externally, what we're really doing is reaching out to our clients and partners and asking them, they've never done this before. They've never turned as we get into reentry or recovery or whatever we want to call it, nobody's done this at this scale before. So working with them to try and think about, what are you going to need? What data do you need? You're laying out these decision points. What data do you need to make these decisions that you're saying are going to guide your pathway to going back to work or reopening, and trying to get ahead of the decision, because we've been playing catch up. So trying to get ahead of that. When you say, I need, there's one state, for example, that says 3%, they have to, their reopening criteria is based on a less than 3% positive rate on their aggregate tests for each day. Well, how are you going to do that? So try and get ahead of that and think about how we create or find the data and display it to decision makers. Do you need a new business process? So we're asking probing questions to try and figure out what is coming for these decision makers as we enter this new phase. And we're really, really hyper-focused on that. None of us have done this before, so we're all kind of learning together. And it's super important that we iterate through this so that we can get them the tools that they need to make good decisions.
Chris, that was spoken like a true data guy. That was a data answer. And I'm also going to focus this question, or start with you on this question, Chris, too. Our last question for our discussion today is based on recommendations. Are there any recommendations or resources that others can use to improve communication and resiliency within and across public and private organizations?
Yeah, this is so first thing is write down what's working and what's not working for you now. And I'm saddened that I talked to a lot of people who are so in the moment. When we say, well, what did you do what was going on when you made that decision 2 weeks ago? Then they don't remember. So write it down because it's going to be critical to be able to look back and figure out what worked and what was the scenario or the environment that you made that decision or that choice within. Then learn technology. Learn what you have. A lot of places are chasing technology. Why are you choosing to go from this crisis management system to that crisis management system? And you can't just, well, because you didn't like the old one, but you can't tell me what the new one does. So stop chasing it. Learn basic technology. Explore things like chat and Teams, as Greg mentioned. There's a lot of people that are communicating primarily by conference call. That's got pros and cons. One of the cons is you don't have a record of the conversations and you can only have them singularly. But if you're using chat rooms or those kind of tools, you can have multiple conversations going on. You have records of those conversations. I think it would improve your effectiveness. And resiliency, I'm going to go back to thinking about things like what we did with the hub and having it in a scalable platform. They used to be largely in emergency management agencies that they had to own their infrastructure in their building and didn't trust the cloud. Learn to trust the cloud because it will scale, expand and contract as your organization needs it to expand and contract versus having to own a bunch of boxes that some of you can't get to now. So those are just kind of my initial thoughts on what I'm seeing. Look forward to hear what the other panelists say too.
Chris, thank you. I love your recommendation of writing it down. In fact, I wrote it down. Write it down. So, all right, Rob, I'm going to pose that question to you.
Yeah, sure. Of course, I echo what Chris said. Makes a lot of sense to me. And, kind of to take this whole crisis and consider, the whole thing worthy of an after action report sort of thing, where you are really doing a lot of introspection of what worked and what didn't, and making sure that you understand that this could happen again in a different format. This is obviously something none of us has ever seen before. and it's a national problem rather than a regional problem, and that everybody, sometimes there are some cases where, like with a natural hazard like a hurricane, it's a regional thing where state boundaries didn't matter. You're in the southeast of the United States. It doesn't matter if you're in Georgia, Alabama, Florida, whatever it is, it's going to affect you all without state borders. And this one is one that state borders do have an important meaning here as different states are taking different actions. And that might influence your planning going forward. So that's just one sort of reflection of how this crisis could lead to different decisions. So, I think that general idea of being retrospective and introspective about what worked and how we might be able to respond, again, I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone who was caught flat-footed with this particular crisis. And of course, I do think that this discussion throughout, one of the themes, of course, is the access to data and the access to good data and to data that has been vetted and has a certain degree of reliability to it and a certain degree of sensitivity to it too. Knowing you all in the private sector probably have some business sensitive data that could really help us and in its sharing in different ways. And I would say that a recommendation for building resiliency, not just for your own organization, but across the country, is to strategize ways of sharing that information such that it's not business sensitive. What is an important thing for cross-sector analysis of your own data? We don't need to see every single financial transaction of, every single credit card transaction. We could kind of roll that up into summaries that could be very interesting for analysis and would not contain as much sensitive information, but still be able to be shared among researchers and analysts and so on to improve resiliency. So I think there is, and that probably speaks to what Chris was talking about just a minute ago with the cloud, speaks to just generally how we now need to think about sharing information for the good of society as well as sort of for our own business and kind of more bottom line respects. So yeah, I think that probably is all I'll say about that, but I'm sure there are a lot of you all out there and of the attendees probably have even better ideas than we have. So
thank you, Rob. And Greg, do you have any last comments on recommendations or resources?
Oh, I think Chris kind of hit it right. It's what's working, what's not working. Even when you start looking at Zoom and Teams, if you experience any latency within the teams, it's like, well, what's my backup plan? And if you need to upgrade your licensing to create that, dial in and pin instead of using the audio on the computer and dialing in with your phone, that's a good backup plan, and anytime you get on a leadership call or a private sector call, you definitely want to make sure that everything is working and there's no latency and issues. And the video capability is great, but it does eat up a lot of bandwidth, those types of things. And we want to establish some of those repeatable processes, get everybody in a groove. It's what's working. Let's build off of that. We have a unique opportunity here. This is not going to, end anytime soon. So let's keep building off the capabilities that we're building now. What are the use case studies and problems that we're having, and see if we can provide solutions to that. But that kind of wraps up my comments on that.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the three of you. I appreciate your time on the call today. I know you're going to stay on for a little bit longer to answer any questions, but also thanks for all you do in your jobs and for this industry. I appreciate it so much. Tom Moran, are you still on the line?
Yes.
So why do you, yeah, we can hear just great. Do you want to talk a little bit about how people can register with the SICE?
Sure. So first of all, why would you want to do that? Well, the SICE is a constantly moving community. It is 15,000 stakeholders nationwide today, but more importantly, it's leveraging efforts and information and knowledge and expertise amongst themselves, which is really fantastic. And if you want to register for that, there's no cost. You can go to siceusa.org. That'll run you through a quick little process, and you'll end up on a landing page. Why is that important? Well, on that landing page, you're going to get access to several things. One, you're going to get access to our SICE mind map. This has dozens of videos, technical information, updates, new products that we got 4 new products coming out just as a result of COVID because of our partnerships with DHS and Idaho National Labs in the states and industry. And you can learn a lot about that, right? Once you're involved in the SICE, you're going to be plugged into opportunities to see and learn and offers made available for people that are interested in a specific issue, leveraging R&D. There's lots of benefits to that. So there's no cost for registering, and you can do that literally in less than 2 minutes, maybe less than a minute. Secondly, in the SICE, we only work with people that have been vetted. So it isn't like a public free-for-all. People come in, we want to know, have they registered, right? If they haven't registered, they're kind of outside the trust circle, if you will. Once people are registered, we know a little bit more about them, as you'll see when you go through the process, and it protects everybody, you and the people in there. And we start sharing information. We want to make sure we're sharing with people that have been vetted and isn't somebody pretending to be, or at least best as we could do, somebody's not. And we've had a few of that over the years, but not too many. So we're very happy that you all could join us, and I really want to thank our speakers. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Maybe in the future we can get into some of the practical demonstrations and applications of these products. There is the commercial routing app, which is a very innovative technology that Rob mentioned. We can get deeper into that. There's a new PPE National Directory Service that's being launched by the SICE Working Group. Maybe we could get into that, show how we can nationalize this whole directory of vetted people. There's a private sector feedback survey. You know, a lot of companies haven't had a chance to give their operational feedback to their states in an anonymous fashion. Well, the SICE developed one. We're testing it right now. This will be used in every major event going forward, and it gives states an opportunity to get real feedback from those, not just to have lobbyists that can bang on the governor's door every day, but for those that maybe not have that kind of access to the governor or decision makers of the state, but they can be heard. They have an equal voice, which is great. And of course, this webinar series is another one. There's a lot going on with the SICE community. So anyway, that's the benefit of being registered within the SICE. Laura?
Yeah, no, you mentioned another one coming up. We have one that was just confirmed for May 7th at 4:30. We heard from a couple of states on Tuesday, and now we're going to hear from Maryland, Florida, and Louisiana. So we'll be sending out a registration link to everyone on the call for that. And now it's time, we want to hear from you. So if you have any questions for me, for Tom, for our panelists, go ahead and type them in the Q&A or chat feature in Zoom. Let us know if your question's for a specific speaker, and then we'll get that addressed. And I'm also going to put my email address on the screen in case you have any questions for me. In the meantime, Rob, I'm going to stop my screen share and ask if you wouldn't mind just doing a quick show of that tool we were talking about, Greg was talking about.
Sure.
Right.
Let's see, share screen. I know I need to do, it's going to look like, aha, here we go. This will do it. So, you know, one of the things about a big crisis, whether it's Spanish flu or World War II or whatever you might, you know, name it, and it is the, you know, kind of ability to leverage lots of creativity and, you know, again, a common mission leads to great innovations. And I'm certainly not saying that what we have developed here is a great innovation. It is a small step in that direction, but it does have, you know, kind of, we all were kind of all hands on deck. Let's pull together something like that we could turn around quickly, build on in the future. You know, this is, again, just sort of the beta, maybe a prototype. Certainly is operationally useful, but you know, we know that there are some additions and some capability enhancements that are probably going to need to be added going down the line. But you know, this was the product of that kind of quick turnaround request we got from DHS. We developed a use case through the All Hazards Consortium and the CISA of DHS. When we learned that through the, is it the Transportation Working Group or the Logistics Working Group, the Fleet Working Group from the All Hazards Consortium was having a hard time figuring out the differences between the states as they are traveling across the country. If you're delivering something from Los Angeles to, say, North Carolina, you have the option of going through several different routes, and which one of those routes would cause you the least amount of restriction if you are a truck carrying a certain type of material or a certain load. And where could you stop at rest stops? Where could you get food? Where could you, where could you spend the night if you are a trucker? So we came up with this thing called the Commercial Routing Assistance Module. Let's see if I can, yes, okay, I'm on. Everybody can see this, I'm assuming, right? Yes, okay.
Yeah, yep.
And so you can see that there's sort of a page here of some summary information of the 50 states and 6 territories that are included in this database. This is a gathering, and you'll see down here data provided by All Hazards Consortium, SICE. This is essentially a roll-up of a lot of the data that Chris was showing that's available on the SICE and individual maps, but might be more useful here in this case if you're developing a route to see a map or a state-by-state roll-up so you can make decisions. Here's the summary of all states, things like closures, medical grace periods, increased weight limits, rest stop closures, and so on. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we developed an interesting visualization for this in that our strategy here for this somewhat unique looking map of the United States is that no one state has, like Montana or California or Alaska, the very big states that might be just as important as a Delaware or a DC or a Rhode Island. I'm going to turn off one of my little screens here. So you be able to see all of the different kinds of restrictions that are that vary by state. We can select different kinds of things that would be shown here and turn them off. There's a legend down here that say, for example, SDLA closures here vary from state to state, and they do. This is updated daily. In fact, it's updated more than daily. It's as soon as the data is updated, this is updated. So we can add government actions to the list of things. So you might be interested in whether or not there's been a primary, if there are cloth face coverings are required, if there's a curfew. So we'll add curfew. And suddenly curfews, there are no curfews here, so that shows up. We basically now are beginning to pull together multiple data sources and data feeds to sort of give you a general sense of the level of restrictions by state. So in this case, with those 4 things that we've selected there, you can see Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Arkansas, and Tennessee are the least restrictive, at least in terms of those 4 different. We can also, by the way, and this is why this is an important thing, that's just a general summary. Let's say, there I am in Pocatello, Idaho. That's why it's centered on Pocatello there. Let's say that I'm traveling from Los Angeles, California. This is just a Bing interface to create the route to Wilmington, North Carolina. That's a good distance, and I will go, and it will theoretically, I think maybe my, because I've got Zoom open, the bandwidth is a little bit limited here. Well, we're going to have Bing create us a route. But if Bing is not going to create us a route, we can actually do that here manually and say, we know that Interstate 10 goes through these states and takes you on a route to North Carolina. And what that does is create this little, it looks like sort of a Google traffic map here of green, yellow, and red. And as you travel from California through Arizona, New Mexico, and so on, it creates this little graphical depiction of the route. And if we then move to detailed information, we see the detailed information of the states that we have selected from California to North Carolina that have those things that might influence our route. And if we don't like that particular route, we can reset it and go maybe on a more northerly path and go maybe through Virginia and see a different set of restrictions and a different set of declarations and so on in the detailed information. And then we can go to the information.
Hey, Rob, can you hear me?
Yes, Tom. Yep.
Yeah, let me go back to that map. I want to make an introduction, if you
Sure.
will. 2 weeks ago, this whole thing was changed. Lots of red, right?
That's right. I was going to say, look, it's updated quite a bit.
It was, well, and this is what's interesting. There's three pieces of this. One, there's the technology, which I don't know how many, Chris, I don't know how many documents this technology is merging. It has to be hundreds of documents.
Hundreds.
That the algorithm searches and plots the routes. It's amazing to do that. So the technology one is the algorithm like that. The second is the data, right, and the sources. And the third one a lot of people don't know about is there are people that watch this every day and have to key the data from a PDF file into the sites, right? This data is not a data feed. This is done by hands and eyes, right? And that's what makes this really sing in this use case. And I think I know you had issues with the bandwidth, Rob, but I can't believe the speed. Our IT people say, I don't know how they did this so quickly, because it's obviously not done on an off-the-shelf program. You guys designed this, which I think is fantastic. So, this is a big effort that leverages a lot of people, and it really is a game changer, not just for COVID, but down the stream. We've been doing this for a long time. It's all manual. It takes a lot of effort, and you guys have basically automated it with one fell swoop. I say one fell swoop. We've all been working 15 years to get here, but you guys know what I'm saying. I think it's fantastic.
I'll just say, we are absolutely benefiting from the data feeds that have been set up by Chris and by the All Hazards Consortium. This has been very, having these data feeds would have been quite a heavy lift for us. We're essentially creating a window to those data feeds here in a specific, and like I say, surgical kind of task here of creating a route and a decision-making tool for dispatchers as they are directing their truckers across the country.
So one other thing, if I may, what's the future of this? Well, from the SICE perspective, this will quickly plot multiple routes based on given scenarios. So in a hurricane, the scenario would be declarations and waivers. Where are the hospitals? Where are the gas stations? Where are the food places, the convenience stores? Where's the food and the fuel and shelters like that? And where the SICE is going to go is, can we find out inventory, right? We're working on this PPE directory. Part of that is going to have us find out the inventories of things that are available. And this is the type of technology now, thank you INL and DHS, that the private sector can benefit from given any scenario, right? So here we go. Yeah. So I learned something new today. You can click on the states and plot your route manually. I didn't know you could do that. Okay, so that's a new one. Okay, very good.
Usually automatic like this is just plotted that and it plots it for us. But yeah. we can replace things if we want.
Awesome. Very good.
All right,
Laura,
thanks.
any questions?
Yeah, no, we didn't receive any questions. So Tom, it's happy hour. If you want to unmute the participants, we can just be super cash about it.
Okay. All right, here we go. Unmute all. Ready?
Here we go.
All right. So
thanks,
we want
all.
to welcome you. So we want to welcome everybody. We decided, Laura and I were talking after our first one that, this is happy hour, right? So COVID has changed the level of professionalism in every organization across the country. And I think it's made it more personal, which I love, right? So we wanted to open it up for a minute for those of you that are still on the call. If you got a question or a comment or an experience of your own, we're anxious to hear it. I'll tee this up. We were joking the other day is I'm learning new things about what I like about working at home. And I have to learn new things. But for me, it's been Teams. It's learning how to use Teams, which is really an interesting platform. There's many out there, but I think for a lot of us, it opens up the door for a lot of things as we begin to work remotely. And I think the second thing is a lot of moms, my daughter's one, has figured out, how can I work at home? I'm watching kids doing work, and she's basically adjusted her day. She has 2 hours in the morning, then she plays with the kids until noon, and she gets 2 hours in the afternoon, 3 or 4 hours in the late afternoon, and she's doing it, right? And she's saving $3,000 a month, right? So COVID has forced her to kind of, as a mom, what can I do? It stretched her what her capabilities are. Now she's thinking, wow, maybe the new work environment is that. And her boss just told her, looks like you guys might be working remotely for the rest of the year. Wow. So that's my comment.
All right, maybe we can say hi to some people, see some names popping up. I see my good friend John Contestable's here.
How are you?
Hey, John, how's it going?
Good. Haven't seen you in a while.
I know, it's been too long.
Well, that's good. I just wanted
John,
to follow up. Yeah, go ahead.
John,
Tom.
introduce yourself and your organization so people know who's talking, please. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, please. John Contestable here, one of the original founders of the All Hazards Consortium back in the day with Dennis Schrader. I was the former Homeland Security deputy in Maryland, and I was also at Chris McIntosh and I go back. I was the SWIC, statewide interoperability coordinator in Maryland back in the day, did a lot of work with the Maryland Emergency Management Agency as well. I retired from Maryland DOT, so I have a strong transportation background, but now these days I'm working with a company called Skyline Technology Solutions, and I'm their public safety communications director. Chris, you've done some great things in INL. I did a stint at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. I did 10 years there, so I'm certainly familiar with your work. And both of you have done great jobs at assimilating data and putting it on the dashboard. It's just a shame that we still have to have so much of a human in the loop to condition the data and be able to consume it and make it presentable. I'm hopeful that this gets easier and easier. As we move to an all IP environment, it should get easier and easier, but it does take a bit of a heavy lift these days to get it consumable and presentable. And you guys have done a great job on that, but your comments on that would be appreciated.
Yeah. Hey, John, this is Greg. One of the things that, I'm okay. One of the things that was kind of done behind the scenes over at DHS was on the privacy side. And this was a low risk for privacy, but one of the bigger lifts down the road is going to be the whole Paperwork Reduction Act. So anytime you're funding anything and now you're, asking or collecting some level of, data or information, we have to go to PRA review. We were fortunately enough for this version to just kind of take a step back and strip out a lot of the things that we were thinking about doing when it was coming to, collecting emails to identify who's accessing the site, and survey at the end of it. Those are the things we're going to be addressing down the road. It's a large lift, particularly even when you're just funding something from DHS.
Yeah. And frankly, though, that's one of the reasons why the All Hazards Consortium was formed back in the day. When I was with the governor's office and it was after 9/11, we saw that ethics and procurement rules and regulations preclude government agencies and the private sector from working together the way they ought to. And even though the federal government has a whole FACA process to deal with that, advisory bodies, it's still very cumbersome. So, the All Hazards Consortium was kind of born out of that need to have a middleman to kind of smooth the way between the two parties. And I think Tom's done a great job at it. And the SICE is a good example of that. It's an excellent tool that the private sector is going to come to rely on. And yet it has the support of a lot of government data that's in the system. So, and there's security controls wrapped around it that allow people to share. So kudos to you guys for that product for sure.
This is an interesting age, COVID, where there's so much data that is actually very much newsworthy that you, if you're watching the news, you suddenly know what a logarithmic curve looks like. You know, these are things that, like, you know, 2 months ago, no one had any idea what the difference between death rates and raw counts were. But now it's like on every tip of everybody's tongue. And so like these sorts of almost basic statistics and sort of data, almost, I don't know what.
Literacy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you basically, I think COVID might be creating and this may be a little bit ambitious to think about, but it may be a little bit more critical consumer of data. And, you know, one of the things that Tom Moran and others at All Hazards Consortium and us at INL have talked about are the idea of, you know, how do we represent generally data uncertainty and confidence in data? And, you know, is it an ORL 1, ORL 2, you know, these sorts of questions of how do we say, you know, this is a vetted data source, this is a generalized data, this is rates, this is raw counts, you know, all of these kinds of things that really do impact how the message is received, how it's, you know, kind of sent out, obviously, and can we all be critical consumers of information? And I think, you know, for now, the human still needs to be there to say, you know, this particular piece of information may not be as reliable, and therefore should be somewhat subdued, rather than this other really, you know, hey, Johns Hopkins. I mean, people are going to Johns Hopkins rather than the New York Times or whatever it is. How do we, you know, direct people to information in almost any context? And I think COVID is providing some really interesting kind of case studies and real world, you know, kind of use cases for being critical with data.
One of the things that I'm seeing, and I know Tom is living this kind of hell, is there's so much unstructured information that is out there. In these important decisions, how are they released? They're released in executive orders or in, you know, some sort of PDF document, which doesn't help when we're trying to actually use that information in information products. So you have two options. There are tools, text extraction tools, machine learning tools that are out there that allow you to pull stuff out of those documents, but they're hard to use. And beyond the capabilities of most public safety organizations.
And they have to be trained to actually pick up the kind of information you're looking for.
Yeah.
And if nobody's spending the time and money to do that, then it's contextually inconsequential anyways.
Exactly.
Hey,
so,
Chris,
yeah.
Hey, Chris Carlson, let me ask you, Chris, introduce yourself, please. Let folks know who you are.
Absolutely. Sorry about that, Chris Carlson. I work for a company called Optima, but I'm a former assistant chief from Austin Travis County EMS and ran the Homeland Security and emergency management sections of EMS for about a decade.
Chris and I have been having a great side chat on LinkedIn during this call. But the other way of doing it is have people who are going through those documents and extracting the information and pounding them into a database. And what I find is, what a lot of people do right now is they say, oh, you can't automate that, and they give up. Like, no, you can put an intern on it. All they got to do is read the stuff and type it into an Excel spreadsheet that you just have to set up the workflow. And that's good enough sometimes. So well, there's more than one way to get to the right answer.
Well, let me embellish on that a little bit. You'll be happy to know that CISA is actually paying some attention to this issue. I've done work with the Office of Emergency Communications within CISA for some time. And a couple of years ago, I got a call from one of the folks there that I know, used to be a firefighter in Fairfax County, if those of you who know who I'm talking about. And he said it was really refreshing, because he said, you know, we're looking at all the guidance that CISA, the Office of Emergency Communications, has, and it's all very land mobile radio centric. And that's good, because there was a time where the big question of the day was, how does your 800 megahertz system talk to your 450? And how do they both talk to LMR, LTE? So But he said, you know, with the advent of FirstNet and the ability to push, you know, broadband and 5G to the hip on a smartphone, the new frontier is about data and data interoperability. And so I've been consulting, I started consulting with them on this subject when I was at Hopkins, APL, and I've continued since I've been at Skyline. And they're paying some serious attention to this because data interoperability is not insurmountable, but it's kind of hard, as you said, Chris. And sometimes you need a bit of a human in the loop for some steps in the process. But you're going to see in the next year or so some guidance come out from CISA that says, you know, hey, if you want to do this, if you want to make this consumable and interoperable, this is some recommendations on how you go about doing that. And I think that'll help bring some more structure to this world because it's an evolution. It's not going to happen overnight. But back to your point, Chris, that I want to make, if you're a company that has data, instead of putting it in a long text Word document, you ought to be thinking about putting it into a spreadsheet because you won't be able to even share it within your agency for your own agency's benefit, let alone publishing it outside the agency. And so it basically says that, you know, companies need to be more thoughtful on how they set up their business processes and information flows and structures, because they can't do this. You know, the big buzzword today is big data. You know, we want to do all this big data analysis to understand the consumer and this and that. I'm like, well, not if you got all these Word documents and SharePoint files and PowerPoints that you can't extract anything out of. And yet you don't hear much conversations about companies really being thoughtful about planning that stuff. You know?
And I'd like to see state agencies also be thoughtful. How many government issued PDF documents do you get a day, Tom?
Too many.
Yeah, exactly.
Who else wants to say hello? We'll have some participants on. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, this is Steve Burnbaum. I'll take your invitation. Great conversation. Appreciate what everyone's doing to help out. And yeah, this is definitely some unprecedented times. It's phenomenal to see the innovation happening across the country. So many people stepping up and doing new and creative things with resources they have. Just hope we can keep this kind of thought process going through the next couple of disasters.
Hey,
Yeah,
Steve,
what
do
they
you do? We lost Steve.
I was going to say, what necessity is the mother of invention, and you're beginning to see that innovation and creativity because we're forced to, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Anybody else want to say hello? Otherwise, we will end the discussion.
So, I'm going to see if I can, boom, here we go. So we were just talking, if people want to know what goes on inside the site, here's what it looks like. So this is why this is hard. And John, you brought it up. So everybody uses email, right? And usually attached are PDFs. And we get hundreds of them. I've never seen, usually during a hurricane, we'll get 2 or 3 documents from 6 or 8 states. This one had 50 states issuing at least 20, minimum 20 documents. I've never seen like it, right? Then there's social media, there's texting, file attachments, and every now and then you get a nice GIS data stream, every now and then. But the GIS data isn't always operational. It's not always, and you got to mix it with things that do that. Then you got phone calls. You know, human networking is the best way for data sometimes to happen. And then you got all those other forms. And at the same time, you got states, locals, and feds, which is the government sector that are sharing information. Companies don't want information to be shared outside of the people they intend it to. And then you got trade and others. So all this comes together through this, you know, meat grinder. And hopefully we spit out, you know, product or information or meetings or PDFs or data sets, things like that. But the one common thread of the whole thing is you. It's the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the people that want to do it, that want to solve problems, that want to work together. And that isn't for everybody, right? We know, we see when we have a SICE registration site, we see a lot of people come there, and the minute they have to identify themselves or put in an email, they drop out. Those are not candidates for the site. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. So, but because we do this process, it allows people that want to be known, that aren't afraid of that can come in and now network. And it really has worked out well. So it's a coalition of the willing, but it still takes people and sweat equity and a lot of things. And that's what makes you, all you folks that are on the webinars in the past and present and future, that's what makes this thing work. It's a coalition of the willing, right? It's really an interesting phenomenon. So, okay, everybody talked out?
Well, I will leave one last thing that people can go check out. I wrote an article for Mission Critical magazine a couple of months ago. It's on my LinkedIn page if anyone wants to look at it, John Contestable. But the point of it, the article was real-time situational awareness, today's holy grail. And the thrust of it was basically that we don't suffer from a lack of data. In fact, we're choking on data. The problem is we can't put that data in context, either geospatially where it exists, as well as temporally what time it occurred, and along with other data sets to make it actionable information. And so, you know, we have to take steps to make our data more discoverable, more consumable, more interoperable, so that it can be mashed up like you're doing in the SICE to provide actionable information out the other end of the pipe. And that's really going to be the challenge over the next few years. And in fact, as much as I'm a fan of FirstNet, I was on the board of directors for the predecessor to that group. At the end of the day, it's still a 5G broadband pipe to the hip. And you have to have content traveling across that to make it actually useful to the end user. And so again, people need to pay more attention to their data structures and how they create reports, and can they make it discoverable? Can they make it transportable and so forth? So we'll see, but it's exciting times. It's not a lack of data. It's a lack of actionable information. So.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.
Awesome. Okay, Laura, take us home.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you all so much, both the listeners and the panelists for today. Thanks for your time, and you'll hear from us or me soon. And have a great night. That's it. Thanks guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.